Sevier County High School, 1967. I downshifted into second to cross a creek bridge so as not to cremate so many bug bodies on my bug screen. Then I gave the bike everything she had on the straightaway heading up the ridge ahead. The Bridgestone was only a 175, but she would do 100 on the flat. By the time I got to the top of the ridge, we were still doing 80. I felt like we might be ready to launch directly up into the hot blue August sky. The backcountry road turned to gravel. I was now sliding 30 degrees down into a valley of fields and far-off hills. The speed was way too fast to set the bike down, and besides that, I wasn't that good. I had jammed the brakes a couple of times already, which resulted in a couple of near-fatal fishtails. Obviously, the best thing to do was to try to keep it on the road long enough to avoid collision and explosion right now, as opposed to slightly later. That strategy was automatic. Keep going. Stay alive. Don't die now. The gravel was fairly large grade, about half the size of railroad bed gravel, which made for pretty good sliding conditions, kind of like the frothing of a big ocean wave you were riding that broke a lot bigger than you were expecting. If you can just ride it on in, you might be okay. As I rode the gravelly foam down into the valley, the bike slowed considerably, down to 40-50 maybe, and I had the vague feeling that I might actually be able to ride it out. Which was when I saw the hard left turn ahead and realized I was going to leave the road no matter what. At least there was a fairly open field ahead, stretching quite a ways downward. No trees. I tried to tap the brakes a few times to slow as much as I could, which is when I saw the barbed wire fence. Down the slope a bit and somewhat covered with vines, but definitely a functioning cattle-containing fence. It's said that the young don't foresee the consequences of their actions, or that they think they're going to live forever. I didn't have any specific thoughts along those lines. I just thought I was going to hit that fence and remain there like a crucified lizard. I wasn't thinking about how much it was going to hurt, or in fact, whether I was going to feel anything at all ever again. I was still going a good 35 when I entered the thin air off the green grassy shoulder, which is when I cleared the fence easily on the fly. The hill was steep enough and the fence was down below enough and the speed was high enough so that the fence wasn't a factor. I didn't try to jump the fence like you would with a horse. I just kept riding into the heavenly thin air. We, the bike and I, landed in knee-high grass on a steep hillside and kept straight lining toward the valley below. I was aware that I had been spared immediate apocalypse, and I kept handling, riding, as well as I could, and then I started to notice that the swishing pasture grass was slowing the bike considerably. The amazing thought occurred to me that I was actually going to survive this escapade. I was still going 15-20, and I can imagine slowly coming to a stop, which is when we hit what turned out to be an old rusted bed springs concealed in the weeds. The wheel yanked right, and I went sailing. A fair ways down the slope, I came to earth in deep grass and slid to a halt with my arms out in front and a mouthful of plastered weeds underneath my bug guard. I decided to just lie there face down for a while. I couldn't think of any good reason to hurry. Also, you're not going to find out if anything is broken or if there is extensive bleeding somewhere if you don't check. I do remember thinking how totally quiet it was. The bike noise must have stalled out somewhere back above. I remember having the thought that I would not try to move until I heard a sound. Whether from sparrow or crow or grasshopper or breeze in the trees or what, I had the feeling that I had interrupted something. And if and when it, the pasture world, decided to proceed with whatever it had been doing, then I would be permitted to continue with my own private concerns by moving. In recollection, I don't remember if I stuck to that sound check thing. Eventually, there comes on you an urgency to move around and see where you stand, although I was not yet standing. I do remember slowly turning around a bit and then sitting up. Eventually, I got up and walked back up to the bike. That's when I identified the old rusted bed springs that had brought us down. I had the ridiculous idea that if that mattress had not been thrown down there some years before in that exact place and become concealed in the weeds, I might have coasted to a stop a little further down the hill unscathed. That's as if I could have steered around it had I seen it. Maybe the small-scale self-centeredness of those thoughts give you more insight into what youthful thinking is really about. At some point, I began to wonder about the immediate future. I had never been on that particular road before. I just knew I had taken a dozen forks into the hills near Cosby. I wondered when the last car had been past my spot. I righted the bike and saw that one crash bar was bent into contact with the front wheel, and weeds were plugged into just about every vent and crevice in the engine. My first thought was that I was just going to leave the bike there for future pasture posterity to mull. Hell, there are abandoned cars and stoves and refrigerator all over those damn mountains. It's not like I would have to plead that I didn't see the no dumping sign. Idly, I tried to pull the crash bar away from the wheel, and it snapped off, thus freeing the wheel. I got the truly revolutionary idea that I might be able to roll the bike back up the slope and somehow save it, at least for parts. If it would roll at all, maybe it could be done. I used a stick to gouge a lot of the crud out of the engine and was amazed to see that I could roll the bike back and forth a few inches somewhat freely. I looked back up the steep slope, the fence. How would I ever get the bike back over the fence? I scrabbled back up for a look. No way. So I went scouting. The first thing I noticed was there were familiar, flat, parallel, rutted paths where cows in the past had moved along the slope. If I could get the bike to roll on one of the paths, I could avoid fighting the grasping weeds. It wasn't 100 feet before I found a gap in the fence where a tractor had gone through and crunched it down. This farm was now abandoned. The previous cows were gone. You are probably not going to be able to join me in my state of mind as I set my slightly used 1965 red Bridgestone 175 up on its kickstand beside that remote, then gravel, country road somewhat near Cosby, Tennessee. Was it youth again, or simply that rational way of thinking so prevalent in Western civilization since, say, the 1500s? All I can say now is, you got to hand it to those Japanese engineers back in the day. The Bridgestone name is a direct translation, bridge and stone, of the Japanese founder's surname. That bike started on the second or third kick, just like it always did. I was back in Sevierville in half an hour.